Alright guys, today I'm going to explain why you shouldn't take language learning advice from natives, right? So a lot of people, when they're trying to learn Japanese, they ask Japanese native speakers, yo, how do I learn Japanese? And the same with like any other language, alright? The reason why is because by the time Japanese babies, like, okay, if you're a Japanese native speaker, by the time you develop consciousness and you're like, you're aware of your surroundings, you're already fluent in the language, right? So these people don't know how it feels to learn a language from scratch as an adult. Okay, so this is you have to ask them advice for certain things. There's certain things that you want to ask them for advice for, and certain things you don't want to ask advice for. And I'm going to explain the differences, right? So actually, someone like me would be more qualified to teach you how to learn French and Japanese because I'm someone that learned this language way later down in my years, right? So, like I'm actually more qualified to teach you French and Japanese than a French and Japanese speaker, because I actually did it. I actually knew how it felt like, how to not, understand Japanese or French. Like I remember the days when like I wouldn't understand Japanese or French, but now I understand it. So I'm more qualified to teach you because I taught myself as an adult, 100% self-taught, So that's the thing, guys. You have to take your language learning advice from people that have learned the language that you're trying to learn as an adult, not as a native, right? People that are native speakers of the language, they have no idea how to learn languages, okay? No idea how to learn the language like that because it doesn't translate, right? It's like you ask a English native speaker that only speaks one language, by the way, and you're to ask them like, yo, like, you have any like language learning tips on English? And it's like, this guy knows nothing because not only did he learn English when he was a baby, right? But he hasn't learned any other languages in his life. It's like, why should you trust him? Like maybe you should trust someone who's like maybe multilingual, like someone who knows like 4 or 3 languages like me, right? Like trust them because like they probably like know something, right? But don't trust like native speakers, like because like they don't give you tangible language learning advice. And what I mean by that is on what to do in the language, right? So my advice is gonna be very specific. My advice typically is just to do a combination of a ton of immersion, a ton of reading, listening of the language before you speak, alongside with maybe some like vocab cards with Anki, right? Like just memorizing like common words. Like that would be my general advice for most people that are learning languages. But a native speaker of Japanese won't tell you that. A native speaker of Japanese would just tell you like just do a bunch of grammar drills and like waste your time, right? And like memorize all these conscious words because that's the way they learn. That's the way they learn English in school, which is a horrendous way to learn languages, by the way. And that's why they're never fluent in English, bro. This is why, bro. So guys, now what advice should you take from natives, right? What advice should you take? Well, you should take advice regarding the intuition of the language. So what do I mean? Well, intuition is your competence of the language. It's basically how much do you understand the language. So, for example, if I were to say I is a cheeseburger, right? That sounds off. Normally you would say I am a cheeseburger. But why does I is a cheeseburger sound off? When I say he have a monster, he have a phone, why is he has a phone correct and why is he have a phone incorrect? When I say he have a phone, why does that sound off? This is intuition, guys. This is not something you think about. It's a feeling. It's like it feels off. When I say he have a burger, why does that sound off? Why does that feel off? It's because you guys developed an intuition in English. So native speakers have an elite level of intuition for the native for the language. So if you want to ask a native something regarding Japanese or French, you just ask him, does this sound natural? Just ask him this. Just tell him what sounds better, this phrase or this phrase, right? And they'll tell you, right? Because the intuition, just the feeling alone, will tell you. So if you're to ask a native speaker, what's better? He has a cheeseburger or he have a cheeseburger? The English native speaker will tell you he has a cheeseburger is more correct. Because native speakers of English have developed intuition that says he has a cheeseburger is correct than he have a cheeseburger. You guys understand? This is intuition. So when you want to, ask advice from a native speaker, you ask them this question. You don't ask him anything about language learning. You just ask him which phrase is more correct, this one or this one? Or like, what would you use more? Or like, what does this word mean? Like, what is the word for gambaru in English, or like, what's the word for, bimyo, or like kimyo, like, in Japanese or something, like, it's like, just ask them like, what does this word like roughly mean? Or like, how would you use the word for I don't know, like in French, I mean, I don't know, like what's like a verb in French? I mean, how would you use the word I can't think of a word right now, but anyway, like, you just ask them like, what's the definition of a word, or like, what's more correct, this phrase or this phrase? Like, these are the type of questions that you want to ask natives, because they have developed elite levels of intuition of the language, because they're native speakers of the language, so they know how what sounds off and what sounds right. Okay, but don't ask him questions on like, yo, how should I learn like, French, or how should I learn Japanese, because they're just going to tell you like, something that's inaccurate, right? Like, not immersing in, by focusing on opening textbooks, going to language schools, they're going to tell you that, which is not what you want to. You don't want to take language learning advice, but you want to take advice on specific things about the language, right? Versus like general learning advice, right? If you want to take general language learning advice from someone, you got to take it from someone who has learned multiple languages as an adult. So I'll be more qualified to teach you guys how to learn languages, because I did it as an adult. All right, I know how it feels like to sit down and listen to French and not understand it. Like, but most French native speakers already understood French by the time they were like 4 years old. Like, 4 years old is like when you start speaking, bro. You know what I mean? So it's like they already like they didn't have to think about it, right? But I had to actually think about it. You know what I mean? So like, I can tell you guys how to learn it. So that's the difference, guys. This is why you shouldn't take language learning advice from natives, because they have a good understanding of the language. Like I said, they have a good intuition of the language, but they don't necessarily have a good they don't necessarily know how to learn a second language as an adult. So that's the difference there, right?